Okay, welcome to the Forum Club. We will be done in 3 weeks. The end of April, the very last Wednesday in April will be our last presentation until we start again in October. I have at least, no, I have one confirmed for fall already. If you go out to our webpage, you'll see it out there. And about 7:20 this morning, I got a confirmation from another person who wants November or December, so that should be out by tomorrow. You go out and see that. I've heard both of the presenters, and they're good topics and good presenters. Now, if there's anyone new here today, I normally, both Joan and I normally tell an old Lena joke. For those of you that don't know old Lena, and it's not Ollie, that's the group, that's a group down here. This is Ole, like Ole Olsen. You gotta be Scandinavian to really know. Anyhow, Ole and Lena were at home one day, and Ole got a phone call. So he talked to the person, and he came back and he was crying. And Lena said, "Oh, what's the matter?" "Well, that phone call I got. My father died." Well, they sat there for a little while. About 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. And Ole went and answered it. And he came back and he was sobbing again. And I said, "Well, what's the matter now?" "That was my brother on the phone. And his father died too." Okay, Markus, you're on the big screen. You can see that we have probably 60, 65 people here, which is really good. And as you know, I do really short introductions of presenters. Here's Markus.
Hi. Hi, everybody. I'm especially excited to give this presentation because I love seeing my friend Les and Bev from back in Moorhead, and also my dad's in the audience today. And Dad, you want to wave? And so yeah, can you guys hear me just fine, Les? Am I coming through?
Yeah, I'm going to kick it up a little bit.
Okay. Well, yeah, my family's been 3 generations in Green Valley, and there is a Santa Rita cactus in Green Valley growing in Moorhead, Minnesota, in my house. So very fun to see that. I'm going to share my screen. This is one of my favorite stories that I've run across, but it's a long story, so I better get to it. Okay. Okay. Well, so this is a story of Gus and Jean Peterson. It's a World War II POW story. And I got the story from his son, Joe Peterson. I work at a county historical society in Moorhead, Minnesota, at a museum. And Joe is somebody that we know, and he wrote down his family story and put a whole bunch of the family photos, and he gave it to the County Historical Society. And that's just really such a gift, because that's how we know these stories. So he gave us the gift of his mom and dad's memories. And this is just one of the stories in the Peterson family papers. I was also able to get this story from the horse's mouth. Gus Peterson himself, when he was in his older years in the 1990s, he gave an interview telling these stories. You can find that on YouTube, Kriegeland Conversations with Ex-POWs. So who were the Petersons? Where were the Petersons? The Petersons were a Norwegian farming family in Tansem Township, Minnesota. Barnesville is the closest town. It's a town of about 3,000 people. In Clay County, Minnesota. So if you've heard of Fargo, North Dakota, I'm one building across the river in Moorhead, Minnesota, and then about a half hour drive is Barnesville, Minnesota. A lot of agriculture up here. Like I said, this is a Norwegian farming family. So his mom Alma, his dad Emil, Ernie and Gus. At home, they spoke Norwegian. Norwegian is Gus's mother tongue. He learned English in in school, so he would have known a lot of Ole and Lena jokes. There's some good photos of Gus in here. Here's you can see him growing up here, and his brother. They both went into the service in World War II. But before we start with the war story, let's start with the love story. Uh, So in 1939, it's harvest time, and Gus Peterson is part of a threshing crew. So that is um, uh, a bunch of young men get together and they go from farm to farm, bringing in the wheat harvest. It takes a lot of manual labor back then and a lot of expensive machinery that not every farmer has. So the farmers pool their resources. And if you have a whole bunch of young men working hard in the fields, bringing in the harvest, you also need to feed them three big meals a day. And that is when Gus met Gene Stanley. Gene was working in the cook car feeding the threshing crew. And he thought that she was pretty, and she was pretty. And I'm sure everybody thought she was pretty, but he was the guy that asked her out, and she said yes. And long story short, they got married on Thanksgiving Day, 1941. And we see what a nice looking couple. Sure hope nothing bad happens to them. 10 days later, the Japanese Empire launched a sneak attack on the United States naval base at Pearl Harbor, killing 2,300 Americans. And Japan's allies, Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy, they thought this was great news, so they declared war on us that same week. And after years of trying to stay out of the war, another world war, America was suddenly pulled into World War II, and we were pissed off and we were all in. We went all in. After just a few months of marriage, Gus got drafted and he went into the service at Fort Snelling in St. Paul in March of 1941. That's where my grandpa's joined this war, was Fort Snelling. I think maybe Dad, maybe Les. Is that where you joined the service too? Did Fort Snelling? I wonder if that had to do with your stories too. But everybody in Minnesota knows Fort Snelling. So he started at Fort Snelling, and then he went to California for more training. Santa Barbara, California, for some training. And in Santa Barbara, uh, Gus's wife, Jean, she was able to meet him in Santa Barbara. You can see here this postal telegram. The Peterson family kept everything. I'm so glad that they did. They even kept this telegram saying that Jean had taken the bus out to Santa Barbara and staying at her cousin's house in Los Angeles. Meet me. And 9 months later, they had a baby. I'll explain when you're older. They named the baby Faith Barbara Peterson. And so the whole time that Jean was pregnant, Gus was away. He was in basic training or in the war. And so they were corresponding by mail. What do we name this little baby? And Gus said, if it's a girl, name her Faith and have faith in God that I will return. And Faith met her father for the first time when she was 2 years old. The first time I ever gave this presentation, Faith Barbara Peterson was in the audience. She's in her 80s now. And she said that one time she asked her mom, where did the name Barbara come from? And she said, then her mom said, because you got your start in Santa Barbara. So, well, okay. So, what's the war doing at this time? It's November of it's it, he, Gus has been sent to New Jersey for training. So he knows he's not going to be fighting Japan. He's going to be fighting the Nazis in Europe. How's the war going? Awful. This is the height of Nazi power in November 42. We have the our allies, the Soviet Union, are on the ropes. They seem to be losing the biggest battle in world history, the Battle of Stalingrad. The Nazis are in Stalingrad, and and it's we don't know how deadly this battle is because Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, they're run by people who lie for a living, and so they don't want to tell you how bad it is. But maybe somewhere between 1 and 3 million people died in this 6-month battle, and our allies, the Soviets, are losing. Our allies, the English, are losing the Battle of Africa. They're about to be kicked out of Africa. General Erwin Rommel, the famous Desert Fox, and his Africa Corps of German tanks and Italian soldiers are about to kick our friends, the United Kingdom, out of Egypt, and that will be bad. Um, and so that is when Gus got on a boat on November 1. This boat here, the USS Santa Rosa, and he got on a boat and he landed. It was part of Operation Torch in November of 1942. 17 days later, he lands in Casablanca. Maybe you heard of it. Uh, and so what Operation Torch was is the USA, we got an army together and we landed on the other side of Africa, North Africa on the west side. So we are landing behind Rommel, the whole continent behind Rommel, but we're giving the Germans and the Italians something else to think about. And we unloaded a big American army there in Morocco and Algeria. Here's a photograph of an M7 unloaded in Algeria a week before Gus got there as part of Operation Torch. This M7, this is what Gus is driving or is a part of a crew of. Gus is part of the 58th Armored Field Artillery Battalion, and he's part of a crew of one of these. It's called an M7, but the nickname is a priest. Um, it the this is he's might look like a tank, but it's a mobile artillery gun. The business end, the reason for being is it's a 105 millimeter howitzer that shoots artillery shells into the air and hopefully lands on Germans or Japan or Italian soldiers in Africa. Um, and but it also has a 50 caliber machine gun and a little turret in case any enemy soldiers get a bit too close to us. And so this 50 caliber machine gun, I guess it's not a small gun, it's pretty big, but the machine gun is what gives the M7 its nickname, the priest, because people thought that it looked like it was a pastor in a pulpit. So when we think about World War II, we think about tanks and bombers and machine guns and fighter jets and the first jets and fighter airplanes. But World War II I was surprised to find it's an artillery war. Most people in World War II, the biggest casualty was artillery. Big guns getting shot at each other. Um, and Gus is part of an artillery unit. And America is really good at artillery. The USA, we've always been really good at artillery. Um, and that's kind of our style. I mean, if other countries, China, Japan, Soviet Union, their strategy is if the enemy is over there in a well dug in position, we'll run at them and they can't shoot all of us. America's style is if the enemy's over there in a well dug in position, we call up the artillery to blow them to smithereens, and then we walk over them. It's a lot. It means that we suffer fewer casualties and win more wars. Um, but but who else is really good at artillery is the Germans, and they really so just because Gus isn't a frontline grunt infantryman doesn't mean he's not getting shot at in a dangerous position. He's as soon as we start shooting at the Germans start shooting back at us. So Gus, whenever they park this thing, Gus digs a trench so that he can jump into. All right. Well, so the upside of me saying that when he gets when he gets to into combat, it was the height of Nazi power, is that what went up comes down. It's uh, as soon as he gets there, November 1942, it's the decline of the Third Reich of Nazi power. Those Nazis that looked like they were going to take Stalingrad, well, the Russians counterattack and they become surrounded in Stalingrad. The Nazis lose the Battle of Stalingrad. The Brits are about to be kicked out of Egypt until the Battle of El Alamein. They defeat the Afrika Korps, and Rommel is running backwards. And at the same time as Rommel is running west, there's an American army, including Gus as part of Operation Torch in West Africa, running east. And we had taken Algeria and Morocco, so the Nazis are on the run now. And on the November 27th, that is Gus and Jean Peterson's first anniversary, and he's not in Minnesota, he's in Africa. Busy time. So here's just a map. The blue arrows show on the left side of the screen. They show the American army going east, with fighting the Germans and Italians, and the red arrows is the British army chasing Rommel west. And they're chasing them all to this little place called Tunis. And Gus Peterson said, "We chased Rommel all over creation, but he finally escaped from there, and he went into Sicily. So Sicily is that island by Italy, right next to, kind of in the center of your screen. So Rommel might have escaped to Sicily, but he left behind 200,000 German and Italian troops and their stuff to surrender at Tunis. This was huge. This is a gigantic army that is now in POW camps. So Gus is part of that. Well, he said, "We chased Rommel into Sicily. We better go get him." Gus was part of Operation Husky in July of 1943. That's the British and American invasion of Sicily. So Gus said, about a month after the Africa campaign was over, we got loaded up and we headed for Sicily. And he said, we basically had everything going our way, according to my thinking, because the Germans were backing up and backing up. Here's a photo of an M7 priest in, oh, I forgot how to pronounce that Italian word, Sciacca, in Sicily. This is the town he would have gone through, so I'm wondering if it's possible that this photograph, one of these guys on this priest might be Gus. If can't quite see it good enough though. But doesn't mean he wasn't getting shot at. It was still dangerous. He said, that was the ungodliest ground I ever tried to dig a slit trench in. Rocky. So, like I said, whenever he parks this thing, he digs a trench so he can hide in it from enemy artillery shells. He said, I know there was one time that I decided I couldn't go any further, hit solid rock. Then when the barrage came in and started hitting all around, I found out that big rock could be taken out of there too. Darn near as big as I was, but I got down deeper. So this wasn't a cakewalk about the invasion of Sicily. The Germans and the Italians, they're trained killers and they're pretty good at it. And so we hit some resistance. And Gus, under General Patton, was part of a couple operations, where when we met fierce resistance and we just couldn't get through the Nazi and Italian soldiers' positions, Patton put a bunch of guys and a bunch of priests on boats and landed them behind the German lines so we could shoot at him from both sides. And he said, Gus described it. He said, well, we got orders to make a small amphibious landing behind German lines. And we did that once, and we surprised them and held them until the main force came from behind. That is his one-line, understated description of the Battle of Sant'Agata landing, August 8, 1943, that Gus was a part of. Completely surprised the enemy. They retreated. Several German tanks were destroyed. We captured a bunch of Italians and 350 Germans. And we thought that was such. And he said that they held the line until the what did he say? Until the main force came up from behind. Part of that main force was somebody you might have heard of, Audie Murphy. So if you've seen the movie or read the book To Hell and Back, that is Audie Murphy, his account of his war years, and this was his first taste of combat. Um, and so Audie Murphy, he played himself in the movie that was made about his book. Audie Murphy is the most decorated soldier in American history. I won the Medal of Honor and all the other medals from a whole bunch of other countries too. He said of this fight, I acquired a healthy respect for the Germans as fighters, an insight into the fury of mass combat, and a case of diarrhea. I had eaten too many grapes. Well, Patton thought that worked so well, let's do it all again. And so Gus got loaded up onto an amphibious, into a boat with a whole bunch of other soldiers, and they landed it's called the Brolo landings. And this one was a disaster. Gus described it. He said, then that evening, of talking about the first invasion, that evening we went back a few miles or so and rested all the next day. But then they loaded us up again to do the same trick, and they had aerial observation on us, and they were waiting for us. We did get off the boat with our equipment and stuff. Well, they brought back some heavy artillery. We had a huge mountain on one side and the ocean on the other, and the Germans on both sides. So in other words, they just plain ran over us. 650 Americans invaded at the Brolo landings. This is a photograph of where they landed. 177 of them were killed, wounded, or missing. 7 of the 8 priests were knocked out, including Gus's, and Gus was taken prisoner. So Gus and about 15 to 20 other guys around him were surrendered by their captain. They stood up, they put their hands behind their head, they were searched, they were loaded on trucks, and they were sent to the rear. They crossed the Strait of Messina into Italy and into Germany from there. And amongst all the problems was Gus didn't have his glasses on when he was fighting. I know there's probably a lot of us in the audience who wear glasses. So being in Green Valley, you know that it gets hot out there, and if you're doing manual labor, such as gardening or loading an artillery shell into a gun and fighting Germans, you you get sweaty and the sweat gets on your glasses and then you can't see. So Gus put his glasses in his backpack. And the Germans, when he surrendered, the Germans wouldn't let him bring his pack with him. So he spent the rest of the war without glasses, and it gave him headaches all throughout the war. On top of being a POW, he had a headache. Where's Jean doing all this? Jean is raising a little baby, being pregnant and raising a little baby at her in-laws' place. And Joe Peterson, who I know, her son, her and Gus's son, he said, my grandma Peterson, that's Alma in the photo, she loved us, but she was not warm and fuzzy. My grandmother Alma really didn't want my mother taking over her kitchen. Mom would at times be next to tears. Grandpa Emil would put his arm around my mother and say, don't cry, I'll talk to her again. So she's having a hard time. Emil and Jean Emil treated Jean just like a daughter, and they had a close relationship for the rest of their days together. But yeah, Jean's not having a good time. And then she gets this telegram a month and a day after her husband is captured. She gets this telegram saying that, well, basically, we think he was captured, but we don't have any confirmation about that yet. We think that he was captured a month ago, but we haven't heard from him since. How would that make you feel? And they get this, they don't know what's going on. A month goes by, another month goes by, into the next month. Finally, this Western Union telegram arrives. Proof of life. Report received through the International Red Cross states that your husband, Private First Class Gustav M. Peterson, is a prisoner of war of the German government. And then they gave her an address where she could send him care packages and letters. The first person in Minnesota to see this Western Union telegram was, of course, the mailman, Paul McGrath. He was the mailman in Barnesville, and according to family tradition, this letter came on Christmas Eve, 1943. But it didn't. They kept the letter, the telegram. It came on November 3rd. It must have just felt like Christmas Eve because they got proof of life of their son and their husband. Um, and Paul McGrath had just gotten done doing his deliveries for the day when he came back to the post office and he saw this telegram. And it was the winter. He got his stuff back on and he went right out to deliver this telegram in person to the Peterson farm. He did it because he knows how important this second telegram would be because he's a veteran himself. 20 years before, he was a sailor in the First World War. He also knew how important this telegram was because his family got that first telegram saying, "We don't know what happened to your cousin." Paul McGrath's cousin is John McGrath. He went missing in action in the First World War. He was a Marine in the First World War, and he went missing in action at the Battle of Soissons on July 19th, 1918. And the McGrath family never did get that second telegram saying that he's still alive. John McGrath has never been found. He's listed in the Wall of the Missing in the Iron Marne American Cemetery in France. And if you go to Barnesville, Minnesota, you can visit John McGrath Park, which is named for him. So Paul McGrath, the mailman, knows how important this second telegram was to the Peterson family. So Gus is a Krueger. Krueger is what American and British POWs called themselves because the German word is really hard to pronounce. Kriegsgefangenen is what the Germans called them. So Americans, they call themselves Kruegers. Where is Gus? We left him. He's going through Italy and Germany in a 40 and 8 boxcar. A 40 and 8 boxcar is so called because it was designed to carry 40 men or 8 horses. Gus said, I think it was somewhere in between 10 days and 2 weeks that we rambled along through Italy and into Germany. They'd open the doors once in a while and everybody would go out and went to the bathroom. Those who hadn't gone to the bathroom inside. Some of them couldn't help it if they were loose. Why, it was kind of a gory mess. We probably got 2 slices of that German bread each day. When I think of German bread, I think of really good, like rye bread, but that's not the German bread he's talking about. He's talking about the kind that's made for POWs, that's made with sawdust. And of course, there wasn't any water until they stopped at the station. And you had to be kind of like a camel, drink as much as you could. So that's all that Gus says about his time in 2 weeks in a 40 and 8 boxcar. If you want to find out more about that, I'd suggest reading the book Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt Vonnegut was an American soldier taken as a prisoner of war at the Battle of the Bulge, and he has some chapters about life in a 40 and 8 boxcar. They ended up taking Gus to Stalag 2D. Stalag means like a POW camp. It is near the Baltic Sea in modern day Poland, but back then it was in Germany. I don't want to ruin the ending for you, but Germany loses this war, and the dictator of the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin, kind of took Poland and moved the whole thing west. And so a bunch of what is now Western Poland used to be Eastern Germany. So this is part of the Poland that used to be Germany. Gus said, I was told we were about 90 miles from Danzig. Well, we could certainly hear the rumble of the bombs when they were bombing Danzig. That's a major city on the Baltic Sea. Modern-day Gdansk. In Stalag 2D, Gus lived in a 2-story barracks with a couple hundred guys. They had wooden bunks with straw beds. He said food was pretty thin soup and about 3 slices of German bread per day. Gus said, I never did get lousy, as in he didn't get lice, but boy, them fleas. One thing they had a gracious plenty of is fleas. Gus said he got an infection and from the flea bites on his legs, and he had only mighty poor paper for a bandage. So life wasn't good in Stalag 2D, but it could have been worse because he could have been Russian or Polish. Our allies, the soldiers of the Soviet Union in Poland, um, they, well, at the heart of Nazi ideology was a demented sense of racism that said that Americans and Canadians and Englishmen are okay, but Russians and Poles are a different kind of people and they deserve to die. So if he was a German, if he was a Russian or Polish POW, he had a 50% chance of just dying. About 3 million of the 6 million Soviet POWs died in German captivity, either of starvation or neglect or just straight murder. Um, or and also nearby where he was one of the 100 subcamps of the Stutthof concentration camp. So we I admit I'd never heard of the Stutthof concentration camp until I heard Gus's story, and I've read about it now. It's as bad as anything you've read about the Holocaust. 120,000 people were incarcerated here because they were a kind of people that the Nazis thought were the wrong kind of people, or maybe they had the wrong politics, or maybe they were Jewish, maybe they were born gay. There's a lot of reasons why the Nazis wanted to kill somebody. And of those 120,000 people, 65,000 of them were murdered just in the Stutthof concentration camp system. That's what's happening all around Gus. And these people were imprisoning Gus. But Gus actually ended up having a gig that he said wasn't all that bad. He was taken to an Arbeitskommando, which means a work farm, 6 miles away from a town called Stolp. I don't have any photos of Stolp, so I went on Google Maps and I just looked around in the countryside about 6 miles from a town called Stolp. And so this, I don't know if this is where he was, but this is what the landscape looks like, this photo. So Gus is a farm kid. And so he was sent to a farm. And see, Germany has a problem. They started World War II, so all their young men who should be on the farms, taking in the harvest and working on the farms. They're attacking Russia, or they're garrisoning France or Norway or Denmark or Belgium or Holland. So who's going to bring in their farms? Well, they got to kidnap people and have them work on the farm. So on this this farm, there were 13 Ukrainian civilians, 5 French civilians, 29 American POWs, the German family that lived there, 1 German guard who was an old man, and all of them spoke to each other in German. So Gus got to learn his third language. Again, he grew up speaking Norwegian. He learned English in school, and now he's speaking German to a bunch of Frenchmen and Americans and Ukrainians. And and he said that farm wasn't too bad a place, considering he could have been in a concentration camp. What was his days? He lived in a brick-floored barn. He rose at 6 a.m., ate a breakfast of potato soup and bread and parched barley. So coffee, Germany, you can't grow coffee in Germany, so the Allies made sure that the Germans couldn't get any coffee from anywhere else either. So to pretend that they drank coffee, they burned barley and put it in boiled water. He did work 12-hour days from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. But he got a break for lunch and 2 other breaks too. He had Sundays and holidays off. So he didn't like it. I wouldn't like it either. But he was also being supplied with cigarettes. He kind of had some money in the form of cigarettes. So Gene was able to get him care packages. And in the packages, he sent cigarettes. And cigarettes in POW camps were used as currency, either with other POWs or, more importantly, with the German guards, because America made the best cigarettes, and German guards, the only way that they could get them is by bartering with American POWs who were getting them in care packages. So a lot of Gus's fellow soldiers and fellow inmates spent their cigarettes freely, but Gus hoarded his because he knew that this war was going to come to an end, and his and stock in cigarettes was only going to rise, and that's when he's going to need it most. And he was right about that. So not all of these workers were sent to the same farm every day. They were parceled off to different farms, and the Germans, all the young men were fighting the war, so they didn't have enough guards to guard everybody. So sometimes Gus, being a farm kid, he got special detail, like working special farm jobs, and sometimes he was alone and sometimes he was unguarded, but he didn't dare escape because he was so far behind the enemy lines in Germany that he didn't think that he'd get far. Gus said, "I wouldn't be afraid of the German civilians at the time, but it would be the Hitler Youth that would have gotten you. Even them little tots that were 10, 12 years old were drilling with wooden guns. They were patriotic as the very Dickens. They wouldn't have thought much of doing away with a Yankee." Now, at some point, uh, a photographer came to that Arbeitskommando where Gus and the American POWs were. And he took photos, and Gus must have bought some photos, probably with cigarettes, because he came away with about 6 photographs from his time in the POW in that POW camp. And so here's Gus right above his name, uh, and a number of other people in that camp. And so yeah. All right, let's talk about this long walk. So Gus was in this this work farm for 17 months. His second and third anniversaries were here. Um, and until January 29. And that's when the guards told him and everybody else, it's time to leave. We got to go now. Because by January 29, 1945, Germany, the writing's on the wall, Germany's going to lose this war. The front is getting too close, and the Russians and the Soviet Union, they are getting too close, and it's time to leave. Gus took part in what I've read in a few different sources. They call it the largest mass migration of human beings in world history. Gus and 6 million other people are fleeing west from the Soviet Union. The reason that's happening is because, well, we all know what the Nazis did in going through what's now Belarus, Ukraine, Russia, Poland, wherever the Nazi forces went when they were winning the war, they brought atrocities and destruction and murder and horrors. And now that they were losing the war, they were getting paid back in full by the Soviet Union, the soldiers of the Soviet Union. So, if you're a German soldier, you know that you're pretty sure and you're pretty right that if you surrender to a Russian soldier, it's going to be a death sentence. This is war at its worst. So every German soldier is running as far west as they can, as fast as they can, because their dream is to surrender to an American or a Brit or a Canadian, because then they'll just be a POW, and that's their best hope to survive the war. They're taking with them all of their prisoners, the POWs that they've collected over the years. If you survive the Holocaust up to this point, this is when the death marches occur. And also, even if you're just a German civilian, you do not want to be in town when the Russians show up to your town. So the German civilians are running west as fast as they can, all along the roads. So on this long walk, Gus he partners up with 2 guys. An elderly, an old man they call Pops, who's in his early 30s. And they're all 3 American soldiers. A young guy they call Junior, who's 18 years old. And Gus, in the service, they call him Pete, for Gus Peterson, Pete Peterson. And these 3 guys walk together. They form a unit. And for the next 43 days. They don't know how many, nobody had a pedometer on their ankle or anything like that, but they probably walked 600 miles. They were zigzagging west, trying to stay away from the Russians, but also, um, trying to find shelter for a night in a barn somewhere. So they'd walk 15, 20 miles a day. Gus and Pete, Pop, and Junior, they would march together. They would, at night, they would unbutton their jackets and they would button two of them together and they would make a makeshift tent if they don't have a roof over their head with two of the jackets. The third jacket would be spread over the three of them as a blanket. And if you look at it, it was right about now, today, 81 years ago, that the days are starting to get warmer. It's early April. The days are getting warmer, and young Junior, he gets hot and he throws away his jacket during the day. And Pop and Pete tell him not to, but he does it anyway. And unfortunately, the nights in April still get cold in Germany. So this leads to Junior getting sick. So sick. First, Gus and Pop, they're helping him walk along. But they are, POWs as well. They got Gus lost a third of his weight. He was 185 pounds when he was captured, 128 pounds when he was liberated. He lost a third of his weight, and so they can't really help Junior along. So that is when Gus gets a whole bunch of his cigarettes that he's been saving. There's a German Jeep or not a Jeep, I guess, Americans, a German truck that drives by, and Gus bribes the German soldiers to give Junior a ride. And they put him on the truck and they wish him luck. And Pop and Pete keep walking. And it was on April 12 that Gus's German guards see two American soldiers, and they immediately throw down their guns and surrender. And Gus and Pop are liberated. Gus said that he was confused, that he was surprised that that there wasn't a fight. There was just only two American soldiers, but they just surrendered at the first sign of an American soldier. But I guess Gus didn't realize that this was the mission of these German soldiers. The way that they survived the war is to surrender to an American. These are the happiest German POWs, that just as happy as every other German POW who surrendered to an Englishman or a Canadian or American instead of a Russian. So Gus was liberated, and also that day they found out that President Franklin Delano Roosevelt had died. So think about that. That's Sunday. The 81st anniversary of that is Sunday. So maybe give a thought to that this coming Sunday. Gus was sent to Camp Lucky Strike to recuperate. So America had, before we sent our soldiers home, we had a bunch of recuperation camps that we sent them to as they waited ships or airplanes to go home. We generally named these after cigarettes. So Lucky Strike, Pall Mall, Old Gold, Philip Morris. The rest of these Home Run, 20 grand, those are cigarettes as well. Gus said he fattened up and ate a lot of donuts. And he got an airplane ride to Virginia and then a train ride back home to Barnesville. So Gus got to live a life. A lot of people that he encountered in this war didn't get to live a life after the war. So Gus felt lucky. He had 5 kids with Jean. They were farmers. They were never wealthy. They were always kind of poor farmers, but they were respected in the community. They were active in their local church. Gus was active in the local VFW. I can't remember if he was a VFW man or American Legion man, but he was a part of that in Barnesville. He was also a part of ex-POW groups that met. And Gus said that he was tired. He was tired of being hungry all throughout the war. So when he got home, he decided to get fat, and so he gained weight. I can't say that. I mean, nobody really lives happily ever after. We don't live lives. We don't live fairy tales. So, Joe told me that his dad did drink to medicate his PTSD. but Joe told me that he was a good dad. And so they had they had 5 kids, a bunch of grandkids, a ton of great grandkids. And Joe told me that 40 years after the war, so this would have been in the 1980s when his kids were grown, um, Joe was over at his parents' house and the phone rang and Joe answered the phone and somebody was asking for Pete. And he, Gus didn't know who Pete was. He didn't know that that was his dad's name in the service in the war. So Joe gave it to his dad and Gus was kind of hard of hearing. So he said, "What? What? What?" And finally he was able to figure out what was going on the other end. Um, it was Junior. This was the first time that Gus knew that Junior survived the war. All these 40 years later, Junior was on the other end of the line. His name was James Mariano. Um, and he called to thank Gus for saving his life during the war by giving those cigarettes, giving him that let him get that ride. And so he survived the war. Gus broke down crying on the phone. Junior asked him if he was going to be at the National XPOW convention in Las Vegas that month, or coming up that summer. And Gus said that unfortunately he didn't have the money; he couldn't afford to go. Well, the Barnesville VFW heard what was going on here, and there was a big town fundraiser, and everybody made sure that Gus Peterson went to that national convention in Las Vegas, and he got to meet up with Junior again. Junior died not long after they met. Um, so yeah, here's a Gus did get to lead a nice long life. This is a program for him and Jean's 50th wedding anniversary. They almost didn't even have one anniversary together. Their first anniversary, he was in Africa. Second and third anniversary, he was a POW. So it was nice that they got to live a long life together and of meaningful work as farmers and community members. I'm going to give the last word to their son, Joe Peterson. He said, "It's still hard to fathom what my dad went through. It must have been hell. He lived a simple life after he returned home, but he will always be my hero." So, yeah, thank you for inviting me to speak to you. This was a real treat to talk to Green Valley. Hmm.